Hey guys, welcome to this one. Today we're still in the invisible hand. We're going to be taking a look at supply today. Again, this is part of our overall arching project. Our objective of this project is to develop a gasoline policy and allocate the scarce resource based upon this process of evaluation while taking into account the needs of consumers to balance the market. It's really important that we do realize that we are trying to meet those needs and we're trying to allocate these resources, and we have to do it thoughtfully. Your standards today, we're really going to kind of focus on E.2.1, which is defined supply and demand. We're not even going to talk about demand today. We're just going to talk about supply and the law of supply. And I need you guys to put your head into company ownership business practices right now. Think right now, what's the way to maximize your outcome profit? Think about that for a second. All right, we have a specific goal for this workshop, and that is to be able to describe the law of supply and the relationship that supply has with both price and quantity. So at the end of this, that's what we need to look at. Now, quantity is the amount of something, and I want to make sure we have that vocab down there. We're looking for that. And notice over in our box here, we have this nice little box, right? We have this box here where we see that it is asking us to pay close attention to the law of supply and the direction of the supply curve, and that might help us make sure that we can answer our goals at the end of this. All right, so supply, without further ado, here we So after that pretest question, hopefully you guys came up with something maybe close to this, maybe not. That's okay. That's why it's a pretest. I don't know where you're at with your understanding of supply, so I want to make sure that we can get this down. But supply, simply put, is the amount of product that a company or person is willing and able to sell. We must be able to do this. Remember our production possibility curve, and when we got outside that boundary, we could no longer fulfill the manufacturing needs at that point. We need to remember that, companies can't just infinitely produce items, and that's why this is an important piece here, right? Because when we talk about supply, we're just talking about what a company is able and willing to sell. If I'm able to and I'm not willing to sell it because I need to keep the price of that item up, and a good example would be pharmaceuticals in this situation. If I needed to keep the price of my pharmaceuticals up to protect my profit margin or to protect the investment that I made on that pharmaceutical drug, what I could do is make sure that I am protecting that through these different various ways. And I think that's really an important piece to understand here is what are we willing to sell? If we sell too much of it, or we have to there's a second part there that we don't know yet. And that's where we kind of have to come into. But really, supply comes as something that we're able to sell and we're willing to sell. The law of supply states that as the price of a product increases, the quantity supplied increases. All right, so as the price goes up, the amount available also goes up. And I want you guys to pause and think real quick. What does that look like? What does that mean? How does that come into play? Doesn't seem to make sense, and it's going to contradict something we're going to learn in the next couple days. So think about that. Take that into consideration as we look at this. As the price goes up, so does the quantity supplied. And that's the most important part to remember of the law of supply. What that means is that the law of supply is a positive relationship between price and quantity. So think of it in terms of profit. This is where I need you to have that business owner hat on. If I am selling something at a profit, and I sell more of it, my profit is likely going to go up. And that's such an important consideration to take when we look at this, because the price of something is likely going to go up if we are continuously inputting this whole part of it. So the law of supply is that positive relationship, and it's really kind of motivated to develop a larger profit margin. Here's what your supply curve looks like. So notice what it means. Up and to the right is always away from zero. That's not supposed to be there yet, but we'll leave it there. That's okay. So notice the labels on the axis. That's the first thing I want you guys to notice, is that when we graph things, I need to see labels on the axis. I also need to know that you guys know where the origin is, and it helps to label that zero, right? That's a zero price and a zero quantity. Nothing is happening, all right? And then the last is just the supply curve. It's always up and to the right, always. And that's just falls into line with exactly what we're talking about when we talk about the law of supply. As we are low in this law of supply, as we are in a spot right down here, right? As we're there, well, the price is really low, so the quantity supplied is really low. But as we move up, right, that price is increasing and that quantity supplied is increasing. And that's exactly what this relationship is. You'll notice how this relation comes into being, and you'll notice that it's up and to the right and always away from zero. Always. It always points away from zero. Also notice that it does not connect to zero. We don't know what's happening at that point, and we can't really make that judgment. But it does go a little past the last point that we're going to graph, and that's just kind of to show a trend. That's not something to take into consideration. So now I want to take a practice and kind of look at this. And you guys will notice that this is much like what we would do maybe in a math class or a science class, is that we have a table of information. This information is going to make up everything that we need to know. So then we start to look and see, and we see that I have created these labels, and I focus on my equal margins, and that's just to keep my graph straight. So what I see there is I look at my data, and my data says that the lowest pizza that we're going to sell is $4. But at that same time, I start at my origin 0 and I go 1, 2, 3. Nothing's going to happen there, but it's still important to have that. And you'll notice on my other axis we'll have increments of 50, and that's important. Now, if we ever get to a point where we don't have a solid number like that, or our increments are off, what we can do is then estimate where it would be and use our best judgment to kind of make sure that it happens. The next step is to start plotting these points. So at $4, we have 100 pizzas supplied. At $5, we'll supply 150 pizzas. At $6, we'll supply 200. At $250 pizzas supplied is going to be $7, and 300 pizzas will be supplied when we charge $8 per pizza. Now that we've done that and we have everything in order, we just connect our dots, and that creates our supply curve. There it is. It's that simple. Label it, make sure we know that it's the supplies of pizza, and we are all set to go on this. So the next couple questions are going to be kind of thinking ahead a little bit, and overall kind of effectiveness of this workshop. I want to kind of have an idea where you guys feel and how you guys feel about this. So there's a quick survey question for you guys to kind of focus on as you guys are working through this. So thank you for watching. I appreciate it, and we're going to take those couple questions, and I'll be right back. Again, thank you as always for tuning in and watching. And what I have here is just the credit slide. This template was designed by Slides Carnival. They'll do everything for you with these designs. I like them. They're a lot more fun than the traditional ones. So if you guys ever want to check them out, slidescarnival.com.